As mentioned in our textbook, Advocacy and Opposition, and reiterated in our Chapter 1, What is Argument lecture, argument is a language-based social phenomenon that enables us to discover what beliefs and actions are reasonable in any social context, and that is concerned with the selection and organization of ideas to justify particular positions. Arguments are considered a language-based social phenomenon because arguments exclude nonverbal communication, arguing with oneself, and implies that it is not a natural occurrence. Because arguments enable us to discover what beliefs and actions are reasonable in any social context, we can assume that arguments are a process that include multiple occasions. Because of this, I believe that this definition is the best representation of argument, because it explains what argument is, what it allows us to do, and how we achieve the ultimate goal of argument. My definition of argument best reflects Tradition 3, Descriptive and Explanation. Our Chapter 1, What is Argument lecture, stated the primary questions of the Tradition 3 are: how does argument operate, and how argument affects social relationships? The characteristics of Tradition 3 are as follows: focuses on understanding how it operates in social ways and why, not a unit or text, but a interaction and or a process. Focus on perceptions and how they evolve, and how they are judged. I believe that my definition best reflects Tradition 3 because it fits the characteristics better than the other three. My definition of argument includes the answers to the two primary questions. Argument operates through language and affects social relationships through our discovery of beliefs and actions that are reasonable in a social context. Not only that, but it also falls under the characteristics by being a process rather than a single occurring event, and by concerning itself with the justification and statements which correlates to the judgment and credibility of the argument. Although my definition relates to Tradition 3, it does not relate and is not compatible with Tradition 1, 2, and 4. My definition is not compatible with Tradition 1, logical positivism, due to it being a process, while this tradition, Tradition 1, believes argument is a thing or object rather than a process or interaction, which was stated in our Chapter 1 lecture as well. Our Chapter 1 lecture also gave us a characteristic of Tradition 2, normative tradition, that is to be focusing on the ability to become a better arguer. I believe my definition of argument focuses more on how the argument is constructed rather than how the argument is meeting up to standards. In our Chapter 1 lecture, What is Argument?, we also discussed Tradition 4. Tradition 4 deals more with the effect the argument has on its audience and society, and how the consequences of the argument affect the people around them. Although my definition deals with social aspects, I do not believe the effects are its main focus, but rather the context and the structure of the argument. Because of this analysis, I believe my definition of argument best reflects Tradition 3. The resolution, as described in our chapter Debate in the Basics lecture, is not the end result, but actually a formal statement that expresses the basis of controversy. There are various forms of resolution. There are proposition of fact, proposition of policy, and proposition of value. This topic, for example, refers to a proposition of fact because it is dealing with descriptive. The resolution for this debate is cartoons, according to my definition of argument stated earlier, are considered arguments. In this case, the affirmative side, which aims to prove the resolution is advantageous, would be the people who believe cartoons are arguments, while the negative side, which needs to prove the affirmative support for the resolution is not beneficial, would be all those who disagree and believe that cartoons are not considered arguments based on my definition of arguments stated earlier. The obligations each side must overcome in order to win are presumption and burden of truth. In our book, Advocacy and Opposition, in Chapter 2, Where Do I Begin in Argumentation? The word presumption is described as a term that describes the current situation and points out prevailing orders, meaning that it states that the current situation is okay and no change needs to be made. In this case, the negative side must determine the presumption, which would be that cartoons are not considered arguments according to my definition stated earlier. But in Chapter 2, we also discuss the burden of proof, which is the obligation to advocate change to the presumption. To do this, the affirmative side must provide sufficient evidence that overcomes the presumption. To do this, the affirmative side must present the negative side with a prima facie case, as stated in Chapter 2 also. This consists of evidence that justifies the claim, suspending the presumption from being true. Chapter 5, How is a unit of argument created? In Advocacy and Opposition, describes the Tolman model of argument as an effective way to construct an argument. The model consists of 6 parts: claim, grounds, warrant, backing, qualifier, and rebuttals. A claim is the statement you want to prove, and there are 4 types of claims: factual claims, definitional claims, value claims, and policy claims. All 4 deal with different types of arguments, but in this case we are using a definitional claim because we are arguing how something is defined and characterized. Grounds is another word for data. The grounds provide support and evidence for your claims. Warrants, on the other hand, are the reasoning that justifies how your grounds, your data, your evidence prove your claim. Backing is there to help us establish how we have connected the dots from the grounds to the claim. And qualifiers show the amount or degree of force that a claim possesses. Rebuttals limit claims and show under which circumstances might our claim not be true. For this topic, are cartoons considered arguments based on my debate? An example of the Tolman model for the resolution, cartoons are considered arguments according to my definition of debate, is as follows. Cartoons are considered arguments based on my definition of argument. Cartoons effectively allow, in a social manner, a stance to be issued and addressed upon and be justified by facts. Cartoons target all aspects of argument that debaters do in various debates. In doing so, humor is just an effective way to deliver an argument as a serious conversation. Cartoons should possibly be considered debates unless the cartoonist would rather it not be because there